All right, welcome back everyone to Visions for the Future of Higher Ed. Today I'm joined by Dr. Marina Badillo-Diaz, the founder of the AI social worker and an adjunct professor at a number of prestigious universities across the US. Quite a few to list here. Marina, I know you've been doing work at Columbia, University of Kentucky, NYU, and I think there might be a few others that aren't coming immediately to mind because you're involved in so many different amazing schools and programs. And so I really appreciate you making the time to chat with me today and share some of the insights you've gained from the work you're doing with artificial intelligence, specifically from, a social work perspective, but also from what you've noticed maybe different schools are doing as they try to figure out how to integrate this technology. But to take things way back for a second, I'd love to know just a little bit in your own words, what made you interested in starting the AI social worker? Where did the journey sort of begin for you?
Thank you. And thank you, Imran, for having me on your show. I'm really excited to be here to share some of my insights and my journey into the world of AI. And I always start off by saying, my journey into AI is not a typical track because I'm a social worker. I'm not a tech person. I don't have a computer science degree or anything like that. It really was because, as a social worker, like many of my fellow social workers, we wear so many different hats, doing so many different things and different tasks. And so about, I want to say in the summer of, 2023, I was rebranding my website and my consulting business as a social worker. I'm teaching in higher ed. I have some contracts to work in schools. And so for me, I was really seeing how ChatGPT for the first time can help me in so many different aspects of my just everyday tasks as a social worker. And from that journey of that summer of 2023, leading up to that, I was speaking with fellow professors, getting, insights from them on some of their concerns, reservations, pushback, skepticism about this, AI technology impacting our students in our MSW programs. And really, for me, that sort of led my road of advocacy to launch the AI social worker in January of 2024 to provide, free resources for social workers that have, that can be accessible, it's free, so they can really think about how they can intentionally integrate this artificial intelligence technology to support them in their everyday tasks. It's not about gatekeeping, it's really about how I can support my other professional, social workers and really giving them, strategies and, materials and resources to really support them in their journey so they could use AI ethically and responsibly.
That is really, really cool. And I'm sure extremely valued by the entire field. Rena, the folks you're speaking to must just truly appreciate someone that can share those insights from a perspective they're familiar with, specifically
Mhm.
from someone in social work. And I think it's an interesting thing. I was speaking to a couple folks recently who have been in higher ed, over 30 years. And one said something interesting to me because I was asking them if they'd use Chat GPT for some specific task. I think it was for I've seen a cool thing where you can put in an email and analyze the
Mhm.
tone and it can kind of tell you whether someone's being rude to you or not, or at least give you a sense of that.
Yeah.
And they told me that the technology is so foreign to them that they would never have even thought that was possible. So it's not like
Mhm.
the resistance almost, comes from, I don't think it can do that. It comes from a step
Mhm.
further that they wouldn't have even thought that that's a possibility. So I can see the work you're doing being extremely important just in terms of raising awareness about what's
Mhm.
out there. So maybe the next kind of question I have is, have you noticed anyone that is surprised by what's possible? And maybe what's one of the biggest surprises you've kind of been able to share with someone about what's currently kind of possible?
Yeah, no, such a great question. And you're absolutely right. I think, people are coming, from all different, walks of life of understanding of this technology. And when I do my trainings, and by the way, I've done about, a number of trainings across the US and Canada for over 3,000 social workers, including some of my fellow colleagues who are professors, but also just everyday social workers who are in the field. And there is skepticism. There's concern, like, one, I don't know how to use this. Two, I don't think it's ethical. I don't think I'm allowed to. Is it cheating? That's kind of like the air of sort of concerns that, people are raising with this technology. Of course, concerns around bias, is it causing harm, environmental impacts, and I want to acknowledge like those all those are important to unpack and important to discuss. And at the same time, in my trainings, I really break down understanding, how to use tools like ChatGPT, how to ensure that we're following our values and our ethics as social work, practitioners, because it's a big part of our field and our profession that we have ethical guidelines to abide by for our practice, and really showing the power of prompting, that it could really help us in so many different ways. And really, for me, it's about the power of prompting and making sure that you're using it responsibly. You're using it as a tool, right? That they're always ensuring that you're reading over any of the content, you're editing it as you see fit. You're still using your practice wisdom, your expertise, your knowledge that you gained, right, as a professional, but really using it as a tool. So when people actually are seeing this in the sessions, because again, I'm a social worker, burnout is real, being tasked, so many different administrative things all the time, that really takes you away from the quality work that you want to do with your clients or with your communities. This could be a time saving tool. So when people see this in my trainings, they're like, wow, I didn't think something like this was possible. I really could see now the benefits of using this. I could see this, how this can save me a lot of time. People are telling me after the sessions, like their social work practice is transformed because now they're given back so much of their time to do other things that they would like to do, or just give back more of their just sort of wellness and balance, that they're able to do and accomplish a lot more things with these tools, yeah, as part of their practice.
Yeah, I fully believe it, and I've seen it myself as well. And I'm curious, if you have any specific examples you'd like to share, because I can imagine for a social worker,
Mhm,
maybe the most important part of what they're doing, and I could be wrong about this, but being
mhm,
those person to person conversations, that one on one time they get to spend with individuals,
mhm,
but then immediately being bogged down possibly by having to transcribe the notes they took, or
mhm.
document things, and maybe that's where this can start to help speed things up and reduce the burnout of that tedious part of the work. But what comes to mind for you? Where are some of the efficiencies being made?
Yeah, no, another really great question. So there's definitely AI scribe tools that you mentioned, Imran, that are out there. And there's a number of great AI scribes that, for not just social workers, but also mental health practitioners, psychologists, licensed mental health counselors. They could use these AI scribes to then record their counseling or therapy session. Once the recording is done, it gets deleted by the AI scribe AI tool, but then it generates a progress note for the practitioner, which they always have to read over for accuracy, for bias, to make sure that it's, in line with their practice. But as you can imagine, this can save them so much time. Some of my favorite tools that are out there are Barry's AI, which has a free component to their AI scribe, but also Upheal as well too, which not only has an AI scribe, but you could also use AI technology to develop treatment plans, to also look at any sort of analytics from the therapy session. It can kind of track tone, positivity of emotions. So you can kind of look at some interesting data too. But and the other great things about these tools too is they are HIPAA compliant and PHIPAA compliant, which is of course important for, confidentiality and privacy of information too. But when using other tools like generative AI tools like ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, some of those tools out there, it's really about the power of prompting that could really assist social workers in completing different tasks, from, let's say you have to write a discharge like letter for a client, or maybe you're a community social worker and you have to develop a community assessment to assess your community surroundings, or maybe you're a director of a youth development program and you need to create some materials for your teenagers for your program on eating well or mental health awareness. Like, there's just so many ways that you can prompt for your just everyday tasks as a social worker. And what's the beauty of the social work field is that we are everywhere. And Ron, we're in hospitals, we're working in legal clinics, we're working in communities, we're working, with grant writing and policy. And so the opportunities are endless to really use tools like ChatGPT. But the most important thing is that you're not, that they're not using any client identifiable sensitive information, nothing that could be identified to the client, no names, no agency names or information. And again, always reading over the content that is created so that it meets, just sort of the need and the level of quality for the work for that social worker for their tasks.
Yeah, I think people are starting to understand that, and I can see why so many have come out to attend these workshops you're running, Marina,
Mhm.
because first, I appreciate that you spoke about the compliance piece. I feel like that's the first thing that will come to people's minds when they hear about what some of these tools are being tried for. But I think it's simple things that are helping people go, oh, I didn't realize I could do something like that, like write a discharge letter or draft an email, because something I'm noticing that other people are noticing is that you can pretty quickly tell a good email from one that's, not well written, but it can take someone at the end of the day so much longer than it normally would to just draft that email. And so with tools like this, if it gets the first draft done for you, even for me personally, if I see it formatted in a way that I didn't have to spend time doing, I can make some quick
Mhm.
edits, put it in my own words, and send off an email that feels like the quality I would like without having
Mhm.
to spend, that significant amount of time getting it to that stage. So even a
Mhm.
small gain like that for folks, I can see just taking one thing off their plate, especially again, like you say, in a field like yours, where the demands come fast and furious and from so many different places. So
Mhm.
yeah, thank you for kind of explaining it that way. I wanted to go back to something you said earlier now, which is just again that resistance piece. I think
Mhm.
that's again a huge part of just how quickly this technology has come into the focus and how quickly it's changing. So
Mhm.
do any stories come to mind about, individuals you've met? And of course, we don't need names or anything, but just sort of in
Mhm. Mhm.
general around, maybe folks who started off resistant to using these tools or these ideas, who kind of came around and had some kind of success story from using any of these tools.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. So I have the privilege of teaching AI and school social work practice. So I teach a 5-week module at NYU in their postgraduate certificate program, specifically geared towards school social workers who have professional experience, at least over 2 years in the school social work field. And so they're coming back for a year-long certificate program, and there's a couple of modules that are in that course, but the last module is the one that I teach, which is on data technology and AI for school social work practice. And what I appreciate about this class is not only it's a small cohort, but I got to work with school social workers over the course of a couple of weeks to really help them not only understand, AI technology tools like ChatGPT, but they also had a data project that they had to do. A lot of school social work practice, we wear so many different hats, and in my career, I spent, over 10 years as a school social worker. And so we are doing so many things in a school building. We are, doing counseling one-on-one. We are writing workshops for parents. We're consulting with teachers. We are helping out with the prom, putting prom planning together. Like there's just so many things that we do.
I believe it.
And part of it is, putting together like programs and social emotional learning programming. So part of one of my students in the course was that she had to get feedback on the social emotional program that she did in her high school, and part of that is sending out surveys to the staff and collecting their feedback on how the social emotional learning program went, also getting survey feedback from the students and their experience and how their social emotional learning advisory program was. And using the power of AI as part of this data project was to have AI not only analyze, right, the responses from the survey, but also develop questions for the survey. And so I taught them how to prompt for creating a survey for teachers, which is more developmentally appropriate for, adults and professionals to kind of get feedback from them on the survey, and then also doing a high school student survey as well too to get their feedback on their advisory program. And then we also prompted the ChatGPT to then, extrapolate some recommendations, some trends that they noticed from the survey, and then create a sort of like one pager of the report on what ChatGPT found to then have that conversation with the school principal about how they're going to plan for their advisory program for the future for the following school year. And for her, she said, I came into this class being really skeptical about AI, not really understanding how it could help me as a school social worker. And it's not just, my everyday task, but even really thinking about intentional planning, advocacy for what I need as a social worker for the program for next year. Like I have data now I can give my school principal, right, on the advisory program to make it better for our high school students next year. And so for her, it really transformed her practice. And another part of her role as a school social worker too is they have to put together portfolios of evidence on the efficiency and effectiveness of their work for their school community. And so a lot of them are like, oh, I could use ChatGPT now to collect some data and help me put together my portfolio. So it's just saving people a lot of time and really transforming how they think about this as a tool to really support them in their everyday work, not replace them, because that's another concern, right? We're going to get replaced by AI. And I think really truly as especially school social workers, we're a human service profession. We're needed in schools to be that sort of touch point with students and staff and families in the community. So I don't ever see us being truly replaced, but I could really see this as a tool to really help our efficiency and be, just be able to do more quality work as a school social worker.
Yeah, absolutely. That's an incredible story, and it really does resonate when you think about what that individual probably wants to focus on. They're probably not interested, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but in doing intensive data analysis on that report, because that'd be a
Mhm.
different skill set. It would take a
Mhm.
significant amount of time, maybe for someone who hasn't done it before.
Mhm.
And it's tricky to know which insights to pull out of a large data set. But they're
Mhm.
also probably someone who could recognize a great summary.
Yeah.
Being given that starting point suddenly completely expands what they're able to offer and now bring to the principal to put into words they'll understand, right, from their lens, again, as a social worker,
Mhm.
with the context of what's happening in the school. So I think that's a great example of how, like you said, this isn't intended to replace someone. It really
Yeah.
can augment what they are able to do and help them focus on what they're actually interested in doing, it feels like.
Exactly.
Well,
Couldn't have said it better.
Well, you
Yeah.
I'm just repeating what you said, really. And, another thing I'm wondering, kind of based on your experience with all these different schools, Marina, is
Mhm.
a big focus for this podcast is really trying to have leaders help other leaders. And some schools are jumping right into using AI and learning lessons as they
Mhm.
go. So they're not
Mhm.
waiting for it to be perfect. They know things aren't going to go exactly the way they want, but they're kind of willing to jump in and figure it out along the way. And then there are other
Mhm.
schools, and this isn't just specific to AI, there are just
Right.
institutions that are waiting to see what happens and always have before they bring in something new. I'm just
Mhm.
curious if you have insights or advice for institutions that are trying to figure out what to do here. Have you seen any strategies from some of the schools who are doing this successfully that we might
Mhm.
be able to kind of share with schools who are at that stage of uncertainty?
Yeah, no, Imran, another really great question too, because I think this is a challenge for a lot of higher ed institutions, K through 12 education as well too. I think just education across the board, the pivot and the adjustment and innovation that this time calls for is, different than I think, anyone could have imagined a couple of years ago. And I see this as an opportunity. And I think some institutions also see this as an opportunity to pivot and innovate and be of the times. And I especially think higher education has a responsibility because we are supporting our graduates entering the workforce, that we have an obligation to ensure that our students are ready for the workforce and what that looks like. And we also have to prepare them for a workforce that we don't even know what this exactly going to look like in 5, 10 years with artificial intelligence. So I know we're tasked with a lot right now at the university level. And I know that journey may not be perfect and seamless, but I think those that are willing to innovate, be open to it, bring in consultants, but also using staff that are and professors that are on their teams to really help, whether bridging conversations, training. I think there's power in just the collective and having really important conversations and training. And it's not just like a one time. I think it's over. And I know some universities are doing this, like NYU. We've had a number of trainings and offerings for using generative AI in the classroom. Same thing at CUNY, the City University of New York. I work for Hunter College as well too, and they've been offering the trainings. And the other piece is the policy and guideline part of this too. So I think there's the AI literacy piece. that institutions have to ensure that all of their professors are trained in understanding this technology and know how to use it to incorporate it into their lessons, incorporate it into their assignments. And that's going to take, I think, years. I don't think it's a quick, one lesson type thing. It's going to take time
Yeah.
as curriculum developers are going to have to overhaul course curriculum, and at the also the policy lens too of universities having these focus groups collecting research data on the integration of AI, developing meaningful policies to really help the university as a whole say this is our stance. I've seen some universities sort of leave it up to the professor that their policy is it's professor driven. So if you choose to implement this in your course, here's a blurb that you could add in your course syllabus, but it's kind of managed in-house within the professor's class rather than like implementing a university wide policy. But I see those at least as a step in the right direction to give professors some choice. But I just know this is going to take time, and the revolution and change of education is not going to happen overnight. It's going to take some time. But I hope that university is going to learn from other universities and their lessons as well on what's working and what's not working and creating system change bottom up and also top down too. And I know that's going to take time.
I agree. I think that's worth
Mhm,
recognizing, and that
mhm,
some of these policies will need to be built in step with
mhm,
experiments. I think there's,
mhm,
from what I've seen, a maybe desire is the best word
mhm,
to have the policy fully in place before
mhm,
anything happens, and it's just not realistic with how quickly things are changing. So I think even that can give people
mhm,
something to think about, that is, okay, we need something broad so that we have something in place, but we're going to need to learn from what happens on the ground as we go here
mhm,
and adjust. So I think
mhm,
like you said, it's going to take time, and it's going to happen in a bit of possibly irregular sequence. But it's exciting to
mhm,
think of what it can do in the classroom as well. I
mhm,
know a top concern is academic integrity, but I've seen an
mhm,
interesting approach growing that's similar to an open book test. Well, now that we know this tool is here, we may as well make it part of the expectation that they use it and enhance what they're
mhm,
asked to do, because eventually, like you said, they're going to be asked to use these tools in the workplace, these graduating students. So why not enhance what the
mhm.
assignment looks like, and suddenly, have them do things that might be a little outside their skill set, but with the use of some of these generative AI tools is suddenly much more possible and reasonable to ask.
Yes, I'm so glad you're bringing up all these points. So, in speaking with other professors too, I think again it's calling for problem solving, creativity, but sometimes I like to kind of turn this over its head completely. I know there's a genuine concern around student learning and retention of learning and how this is going to impact cognitively our students understanding the skills that are needed. So I think in particular of social work, right? Social work judgment is so key and how you build your judgment skills, especially when we're working with marginalized populations, high risk populations, suicide, those who are, I mean, we're dealt with a lot of, child welfare systems. Like we are called a lot to exercise critical thinking and judgment, and how you build those skills is through learning in the classroom and, of course, their internship experiences. But what if you could just use AI to then take out the decision making for you? And I do agree with my colleagues, like that is definitely a concern because again, I always see it as a tool. We can't use that to replace our critical thinking skills and our judgment making skills to rely on, AI or AI algorithm to make these decisions for us. So I really think that a part of higher education across all disciplines is that we really have to focus on critical thinking skills and still leveraging and teaching the content because that's going to be really important, but also that critical thinking skill. Like, can we incorporate assignments that really build upon critical thinking? Like say for instance, I have an assignment in one of my courses as a makeup assignment for their field placement internship is using an AI prompt to say, asking it for recommendations about one of the clients that they're really struggling with to give clinical recommendations. But part of that assignment is okay, here's what ChatGPT has written for you. Analyze that, critique that, use your critical thinking. What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? What is missing from what you're learning in your classes or your practice experience in that field placement? Because what I really want to build up is that skill set to have that critical thinking lens rather than just relying on the AI tool, which I know is a fear of like that slippery slope piece. So that's one of the pieces that I'm advocating for in higher education is critical thinking. And the other piece is that there's been some really great researchers and professors who have developed an AI tool, sorry, an AI guidance assessment tool where it could be used in the classroom to sort of rate your assignments to say, okay, this assignment, you're able to use AI fully. This is an assignment that you could use AI to help you brainstorm, or this is an AI assignment that no AI can be used. So it's kind of giving students the guidance on what tools can you use AI for and what you can't, which I think is also going to be very similar in the workplace, because in the workplace, there's going to be some things that you can use AI for, but there's
Yeah.
going to be some tasks that you really can't use AI for. And I'm going to get you those professors and that AI assessment tool. I'll make sure to send that to you after our talk today, so you could also add that for your listeners.
Yeah, please do. I will definitely link to those resources there, and it is such an interesting point. And I know I have to let you
Mhm,
go in a second here, Marina, but
mhm.
I
Yeah, no
I
worries.
think I
Mhm,
yeah I think I yeah I really agree with that. I think critical thinking is going to be one of the most important skills in this next generation here, and I'm reflecting on the fact that for a lot of these things I'm saying that there can be efficiencies around. I have
mhm,
experience doing them manually, so you do have that sense of, well, it's done this well or it's done this
mhm,
incorrectly based on kind of what I want it to do. But it's going to be interesting to
mhm.
find that balance, like you're saying, that students understand what should be done and then can check what these generative AI tools have done to say whether they
Yeah.
agree with it or not. So that is a really interesting point in terms of
Mhm.
teaching these future skills.
Yes, and just want to put that plug in to give the professor. So is a group of four professors who's developed the AI assessment scale. It's known as the AIAS, and is developed by Dr. Perkins and a couple other colleagues. They first introduced it in 2023, but their second version is from 2024, and it's been adopted by hundreds of universities and schools worldwide, and it's been translated to 29 different languages to really support folks in higher ed and in education to really think about their assignments and their assessments and how you can use AI, but how you can't use AI to really sort of differentiate that teaching and those skills.
Thank you so much for finding that. I think people are going to find
Mhm,
that extremely useful if they haven't come across it
mhm,
yet.
mhm.
I will definitely make sure to highlight that. So thank you, Marina. And thank you for the time today for sharing these insights. I hope
Yes,
you'll come back in the future. I think these
definitely.
conversations are going to continue to be super important as things change so rapidly. I saw a post just the other day that prompt engineering isn't really going to be a thing anymore because it's not necessarily needed the same way we thought it was going to be 2 years ago. So even something like
Mhm,
that, I thought, wow, like that's already changed.
yeah.
And I think it's exciting to think about all the possibilities that you've mentioned, these efficiencies that can really help people, especially in a field like social work, focus on what
Mhm,
they were, probably initially drawn to the field for, which is this opportunity to connect with people, help at a
mhm.
deep level. It probably wasn't to write emails and do data
Right.
analysis. So I hope that that's
Exactly.
where things go. And that could be different for everyone, but in a sense, you know what I mean there.
Mhm, mhm.
So maybe the last question I'll just ask as we sign off here, Marina, is, is there anything you're excited about or hoping to see these tools able to do in the future, or any final pieces of advice you'd like to share before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think I'm excited to see where the future takes us with this technology. I do truly hope, and for me, I think one of my biggest advocacy pieces, and I didn't mention this, but my hope is, we do have our professional development organization. So I know that you mentioned higher ed and higher ed like struggling with guidance and policies, but we have our national organizations like the Canadian Association of Social Work, the National Association of Social Work in the United States, that have not developed just guidance and policy for the profession just nationally, and that is a huge need and a gap. Across the pond, the British Association of Social Workers, they've actually developed their own policy and guidance. And like you mentioned earlier, like they even said in their policy, like this is the beginning of this process. This is going to be updated, changed over time as this technology is changing. but people are seeking guidance and they want policy. They want to know how to use these tools. They want to know that they're using it responsibly in alignment to their profession. So my hope is that in the future that the Canadian Association of Social Work is responsive. The NASW is also responsive with guidance and more research to really see how, again, that we could incorporate these tools responsibly and ethically. But the last thing I do want to put a plug in, I do have my website, theaisocialworker.com. If social workers are out there that want to check out free resources and free tools, I also have my Instagram account, the AI Social Worker, also where I post a lot of free information, as well as my LinkedIn. You could also find me on LinkedIn. Please feel free to message me, reach out. I love building community. And just like Imran, I would love, this is a first part. I hope to come back again and we can keep the conversation going.
Absolutely, Marina. Thank you for mentioning the ways to get in touch with
Yes.
you. I think it would be an invaluable conversation to have, folks. If you do reach out to ask questions, it's been fantastic learning from you, Marina. So I have nothing but good things to say, and I'll make sure to provide those links as well in the
Thank you.
description, everyone, if you're looking for them. And
Mm.
looking forward to the next conversation already, Marina. Thanks so much for being part of this today.
Yes. Thank you, Imran.